every one of us was worth him, was worth what he did. And so as we practice life, as we care for people in this context in particular, we're caring out of that place.
Well, hello, I'm Dr. Jennifer Kang. Welcome to the Restore Healthcare podcast. And I just want to remind you, if you've been really inspired by this content, to make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. That helps us to get our content out to more people. And today I get to welcome back to our studio, Paul Manwaring, who has with me enjoyed a little traipse through foundations of what we think dual realm healthcare could be and should be. Paul, thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
We're on to our next core value, which is our second in a series of what we think will be 12. And this one, it talks about the value of each individual human life. I'm going to go ahead and read it. And then I'm going to ask you to just begin to elaborate on your thoughts with this. So our second core value of dual realm healthcare values each individual human life as uniquely created and sacred, and therefore worthy of protection and healing effort. What does that mean to you, Paul? What does it mean that each individual life has value?
I mean, there's no question really that, in fact, it probably applies to all of the values, that there's a starting point that you either believe or you don't believe. And this is obviously the big one, that we are made individually, that the human is made with a soul, that human beings are made in the image of God, and male and female, he created us, and therefore we are a unique part of creation, and there's no other species on earth like us. And so that's the broad, and then the deep is that every one of us is an individual, uniquely created, uniquely born in time, date and place, uniquely, as it were, like gifted, uniquely has put inside of each one of us desires of our hearts. And so it's that every one of us is individually created in the image of God, valuable in our own individual right, and that there's no one else like us. And I would dare to say there's no one else who has the same assignment as us, that each one of us has a unique assignment, a unique expression. So it's that really, it's the bottom line. You, as Sue says about other things, she sometimes says, my wife, Jesus is who he says he is or he isn't, you decide. It's kind of like we are either individuals made in the image of God and individually loved, valued, and known by him, or we're not.
Yeah. And so this is foundational, this undergirds the worldview that we have. And we're saying this actually undergirds a lot of the values that we actually have become accustomed to in healthcare. You use this phrase, which is so commonly used that I think we've forgotten a little bit the meaning of it, which is made in the image of God. And it's almost become a religious catchline. But to you, to me, that has so much meaning, so many layers of meaning. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? What does it mean to be made in the image of God?
Yeah, it's one of those staggering statements that's there, first chapter of our Bible. Let us make man in our image, male and female, he created them. And there's kind of about 3 or 4 definite, distinct layers in there. Let us, I think, is actually very important. It's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Let us make man in our image, which for me is both a physical image, a spiritual image, a emotional image, and a relational image. I think that all those 4, as we read the Bible and we get to know God more, we can see that he is spiritual, relational, emotional, and physical. And so there's we're made in that image. We're also made, my phrase, which I would use in more creative settings, although doctors, scientists are creative in a different way. We were created by the Creator to use our creativity to point mankind back to the Creator. And to me, as that's that sequence, which is absolutely stunning. And there's obviously nobody else in those early chapters of Genesis. There's no other species that has that same statement made. So we have this extraordinary privilege of being made in His image, and that we've been placed on this earth to co-labor with Him. And there's just something stunning and beautiful about that. And of course, there's the wonderful truth that it's male and female, which often gets overlooked. So it's that for me. Again, it's this incredible statement. But isn't it incredibly empowering that that God would trust us to be made in His image? He would take the great risk that we were made in His image, and of course, that the story includes us messing up. But it's one of the most empowering statements in the Bible. And it's absolutely essential as well in the sense of what we're talking about, because He created this planet. So His image created the planet, and then He puts us on the planet in His image to govern, manage, subdue, tend, and care for the planet. And one can't help but wonder that no other species could do that because they weren't made in His image. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. And you're getting to this idea of representing unique aspects of God Himself, that each individual almost has a unique aspect of mirroring, looking like an aspect of God and functioning in an aspect of God. That seems incredibly holy and wow. Like the depth and the magnitude of that seems really significant.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it any other way. I mean, we'll come to this in some different ways, I'm sure. But a lot of people just say, I want everything to be supernatural. I just want to leave it all to God. Well, the last time I checked, if you leave your garden to God, it doesn't turn out very well. And so He's created us in His image, with access to Him, with ability to think for ourselves, to plan for ourselves, to design, to create, to grow, to manage, and made in His image. We're the only ones who can actually take care of this whole planet and our fellow man and the species on the planet, because we were made in His image.
Yeah, I think that there are some secular worldviews that I can think of historically as well as currently that have sometimes placed almost a gradient scale on the value of human life, where some have more value than others. Do you see that as happening in our current cultures around the world? Is that still an issue?
I think it definitely is, and it's definitely related to worldview, and it's related to. I mean, you've only got to take the news, haven't you? I mean, it's the classic thing that, and I'll just put it this way: if there's an air crash in another part of the world, the BBC News will tell you how many Brits died. I mean, every country does it. We're not unique in that. So there is sadly that, and we seem to accept certain things that happen, in third world countries, and yet we're inundated with the news of one person dying for 10 days because in our culture they had a different status or influence. So it's definitely there. And of course, we've still tragically, got the battle of race, and of gender and of poverty, to name three. And we're still fighting, in many respects, for everyone to be recognized in their equality of being made in the image of God, fundamentally.
Yeah, this word equality, it seems to be such a core value that we are taught and that we believe in healthcare, that every single patient that comes to us deserves healthcare. And I think to some degree, our secular healthcare mindsets have forgotten that that belief came from a Judeo Christian worldview where individuals have the right to equality and justice because they each have individual value based on an intrinsic value that God assigned to them because He's the creator. I think also in healthcare, we fairly frequently encounter age groups of people who don't always seem to be given the same amount of value in a society, like the very elderly. Do they have the same value? Uh, are they contributing to society? What about the very disabled? And in healthcare, that's often a focus of what we do. Those people still have value in your worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some themes that I suppose are known to be some themes of my kind of teaching, and probably two of them would be living in tension and the whole area of the secular sacred. But for the context of this, the living in tension piece is almost everything that we're talking about is about us learning to hold the tension that we find ourselves in. And so, I mean, the healthcare professional is holding different things in tension, is holding the fact that we're made in the image of God, and yet we're not immortal, we're mortal. And then the healthcare professional is holding in tension, what appears to be, what seems to be a greater tragedy if a 4-year-old has cancer than an 84-year-old has cancer, and holding those things in tension. But in that context, there's something that I think really, really kicks in. And I think our faith, and especially the sort of the language of the presence, really helps, because one of the keys for any healthcare professional is to be present for the patient, and in being present for the patient, that you kind of step into an engagement with their value. I often see, separation will cause us to dehumanize and even demonize people. But once we're in the presence of a person, the closer we get, the more we recognize that they're a fellow human being made in the image of God, and that kind of there, but by the grace of God go I. So I think it's that. I think the healthcare professional finds themselves juggling those kinds of elements. If you sit in policy of healthcare 100 miles away from the patient, you'll view the 84-year-old differently than if you're sitting by the bedside and the husband's by the bed as well. Does that make sense? And I think it's that. So I think there's the divine tension, there's the secular sacred nature, and then there's this presence element. And I think all three of those kind of work together in the healthcare professional, that they are stewarding the secular sacred, they are being as present as possible, and then they're holding on to the tensions of life in the way that they practice.
Yeah, you're pointing out that some of the evidence for what you're believing is readily experienceable in the presence of someone. Like we as humans actually experience each other's humanity. We can all readily identify it, and we can sense it. We can actually see it in the faces of the people that we're with. And it's no longer an abstract reality. It's an experience. These people, I think we use the word worthy. Each individual human life is worthy of protection and healing effort. That's kind of a unique word to use. How would you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, this dangerous question, because my favorite parable is Luke 15, and the boy comes home, and the father puts a robe on his back. And my understanding is that robe is the robe of value, of significance. It's not a cheap bathrobe in a budget hotel. It's the robe reserved for the visitor to the business or the small village. And in that moment, what it was happening is the Father is saying, you're worthy. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to stop smelling of pig. Put this robe on. And Jesus died for us, not because we were worth less, but because we were worth him. And that's so central to our faith. And I think often we find ourselves with a gospel that says, he died because I was worthless. No, he died for you because you were worth him, which is a stunning, incredible truth. And that, I'll often say that if Jesus had looked down the corridor of time and that every human being, as it were, contained one gold piece, he would weigh all those gold pieces on the scale, and he would stand and he would outweigh them all. Every one of us was worth him, was worth what he did. And so as we practice life, as we care for people in this context in particular, we're caring out of that place that says, you don't have to clean up. You don't have to clean up your act. You're worthy. And we have the evidence, and John 3:16 is so beautiful, obviously, but for God so loved, which for me is depth, that whosoever, which is breadth, and therefore everyone is worthy to a depth and a breadth that was worth Jesus dying for us, and therefore surely it's worth us caring for humanity, for mankind, for people.
Healthcare professionals, I'm so excited to be able to connect with you on issues regarding spiritual needs in healthcare. We want to partner together to see some of the ruined places of healthcare culture restored by hope. Follow us at restorehealthcareproject.org and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media. So the worth and value of an individual patient that we are encountering, it stems from made in the image of God, and then is further evidenced by the reality of what Jesus was willing to do for us, for them. So even patients at the beginning and the ends of life, where their function and value might seem to be less, or perhaps, Paul, maybe some people would think about people who've wrecked their lives with the choices they've made, and they come to us in healthcare ruined, essentially, whether it's by addictions, lifestyle choices, morbid obesity. Maybe they've ruined their lives with their sexual lifestyle, and their bodies are racked with infections or HIV. And there would be a human impulse to pull away and say, you did this to yourself. Why should I help you? You ruined your life. But you are pointing out that it's the example of Christ that actually fuels our ability to give equality healthcare.
Yeah, I think it's that, and I would probably add its proximity. So it's the proximity to the person that, I mean, it changes everything, doesn't it? It's that, you can read of somebody on the front page of a newspaper and have one view, but when they're, rushed in at 10 o'clock at night and they're surrounded by, by family, whatever they've done to their lives, there's that proximity, and something kicks in, that is, that person's worth fighting for, and that person's worth helping. And I guess it's clearly Jesus as well. It's the Holy Spirit in us. But it's something to do, I think, with the fact that Jesus is Redeemer and he is Restorer. And so he will redeem the drug addict who's messed up their lives, and he will restore the years the locusts have eaten. And we're back to made in the image of God. There's something there, I think, about believing that he redeems and he restores, and that if every individual is worth him, and we find ourselves in the proximity of that person with opportunities, skills, whatever it is, treatment, then there's not many of us that don't jump in and want to do something.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. I also think that there are some worldviews that see God and disease in a different way than perhaps you do. Uh, and that influences how you would approach somebody who finds themselves in disease or an injury. What's your worldview about God and disease? Is he a harsh, vindictive God that sends disease and pain and suffering to punish us, to teach us a lesson? Where does that factor into this?
Yeah, I mean, my worldview and my view of God, he's good. He's a good God. He's a good father. Even so, I recently found myself studying the Ten Commandments because something jumped off the page at me. And I just had this thought that the Ten Commandments actually not written to, as it would, stop us sinning first. The Ten Commandments are actually written to keep us in abundance first. They're actually, because if you break them, you step into lack. You step into loss and you step outside of him. And they all begin with, our God is a jealous God. He's not jealous of us. He's jealous for us to experience all the best of life. So I think what we've often see is we construct a view of God out of the wrong theology. The angels were positioned to stop us getting back in the garden so we didn't eat the tree of the other tree, and then we would have been permanently unredeemable. And at the other end of the Bible, people quote Judgment Day, and they've got the wrong definition, because he's going to judge for us, and he delivers everyone whose name is in the book of life. And in between those two, we've got this unfolding story of the goodness of God, and he's a good father, and that a good father wouldn't send cancer to teach me a lesson. The problem is that he's so good at turning trash to treasure that sometimes people think he sent the trash. So we have this kind of false narrative that says, "Oh, God was so amazing. The cancer took me on this journey, and this happened, and I met these people, and I got this, I got this breakthrough. God must have sent it." No, he's just really good at touching trash and making it look beautiful. So my view is he's good. I don't have a theology of suffering. I have a theology of the goodness of God, and within that, I position the suffering, and I position that as being the result of us stepping outside of his perfect plan, his principles for life on earth, and the way that he wanted us to live.
Hmm. And in many ways, science has helped to reveal God and who he really is, uh, in parallel with theology. But I say that because I think about how science has helped us understand the biological basis of how disease occurs, and how does cancer happen, and we actually have natural explanations for why and how it happens, that allow us to step back and say, we actually can't blame this on God. Biology has been altered from original design, and the fact that we can see that it's gone wrong, it does point to him as the designer. And it does give us a perspective of God didn't make it this way for me. And therefore, I can actually step into that space and look for God's solution without being confronted by a worry that God caused this.
Yeah, I picked up something. I mentioned this book to you, the book that made our world. I'll just read a quick quote. It said, during the 20th century, science became increasingly intertwined with technology and industry. However, until the 19th century, science was natural philosophy or natural history, a subdivision of theology, natural theology, or general revelation. I'm like, that's actually quite amazing, really, and makes some sense of I mean, just how closely connected theology was to science. And obviously, science includes medical science, but its roots were natural philosophy, the understanding of nature, and that science was more of a branch of theology than anything else. That's like that. That's I think the problem is we've kind of forgotten some things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, take me back to just this moment that you keep alluding to when you have a healthcare worker who is encountering a patient in need. And there's different roles, aren't there, of what we find ourselves able to give. So if we had this worldview that we're talking about, that this person in front of me has unique value, made in the image of God, is worth him, worth Jesus, worth restoration. When I participate in helping that person, how is that a demonstration of who God is? And how does that look different depending on our roles?
Well, it's got to be one of the best examples, if you look at healthcare, of a team working together for a common purpose. You know, the Ephesians 4:16, the whole body fitted together, every joint supplies, for the building up of the body in love. I mean, it's almost you've got the team of healthcare professionals, which can begin in the in the triage, in the crisis situation, in the blue light, and then it's obviously it's the life saving, the immediate, which I mean, to start with, that's got to be one of the greatest pictures of the meaning of revival, to bring life where there was death. And so there's this incredible privileged moment. And even those that, situations where they don't end well. I've sometimes heard, people talk about the privilege of being the gatekeeper between this life and the next. So even that, there's a sense of privilege there in stewarding that moment, which can often be overlooked in the sense of loss or disappointment, or even feeling a failure. But there's something about that. And then the whole team, assuming that we've saved that person's life, and wherever they've gone next, they're in the ER, they rush to surgery, they're in intensive care, and we've got all these different people that are playing their part: the pharmacists, the physios, the nurses, the surgeons, the social work. I mean, what an incredible, beautiful, stunning picture that is, of a team working together. And I think the thing what I would add is, you've got the individual patient who's worth him, who's unique, but then you've got all the individual staff that are working together who are equally individual and worth him, and each have an individual expression. And so this incredible kind of almost like mini tapestry is taking place. And the key is, for me, that every one of those professionals, if you kind of put them all around the bed of the patient in a imaginary scene, everyone who's fought for this patient, whatever the circumstance is, you put them around. If every one of them believes that there is much in ministry as the man or woman standing on a stage with a microphone, that they are practicing being made in the image of God, that they are filled with the Spirit, therefore they have access to Him. They have Christ in them, the hope of glory, which brings, that sense of hope, and they have the mind of Christ, and that they're not second-class ministers. You start putting that together in this, fantasy scene, it's got to be one of the great examples of ministering together, a body working together, everyone connecting for a common purpose. So for me, it's that, and I would want the cleaner to know that they're just as important as the surgeon. And we saw that, early 1900s, we discovered that washing your hands and keeping the place clean cut down infection. Where would we be if there were no cleaners in hospital? We'd have a whole lot more infections and deaths and problems. So it's the most beautiful team. That's how I guess I would view it.
We would be so lost. And I even think about the incredible value of the team members when we experience loss, which is what you alluded to, even at end of life. And there are some healthcare workers that's what they do. They are with people at the end of their life. And they continue to do it because they're actually, and I've experienced this for myself, there's this incredible privilege, as you say, holy encounter to be with someone as they pass away. And the fact that we would labor and work so hard to make that experience a dignified one, to try to reduce the suffering of the person in that moment. We're all gathering around their value. And it's so holy and beautiful. And I'm not just talking about palliative care or hospice moments. I'm actually, for me, a more common experience would be to deliver a stillborn infant with a family. And we know this baby has passed away already. And it's a holy, sacred moment still, even though this baby is going to arrive into this world without any life. And I don't necessarily have an expectation that that's going to change. But I'm there with them in that moment to honor the dignity of that stillborn baby, still having had personhood, still having had an impact on a family, still having been loved and cherished and valued, and the holy moment of being able to be there and to affirm that with that family, to tell that mother, your baby is beautiful. And to celebrate the name she gave that baby and to let her grieve and to affirm it, not as this is a dead child who has no value, who will never contribute to society. We instinctively know this was a human life that got cut short. If it's so wrong, and yet I'm going to stay here in this moment with you and honor the dignity of this individual. I think that's a huge privilege. And we do that in healthcare. And the reason that we do that is because the foundations of our healthcare come from this worldview that humans have intrinsic life value that God gave them. God assigned it.
Yeah, and having been in the room for 3 days with our spiritual kids who had a stillbirth and then went back for 3 days to the room, the way that baby is valued will affect that family, that entire family, for the rest of their lives. I mean, it is not, and I guess that's the real dual realm piece almost kicks in there, that this isn't just a matter of let's just close this case. This is a live situation that will maybe fade, but will never go away. And so the privilege of stewarding that moment is extraordinary. And the phrase that I think my wife coined when that happened to our spiritual kids was, the baby was born sleeping with Jesus. That was the language that was embraced. And as you say, just this incredibly spiritual moment that is all about, treating that baby as just being made in the image of God and just as valuable as anyone else.
Mm-hmm. And it touches on their eternal value as well. That personhood goes on beyond this realm. And we many of us hope for that, and many of us know and are confident of that. But in that place, even with my patients who don't necessarily find themselves confident about their spiritual worldview and the possibility of life after death, they deeply hope for it, and they deeply, I would say, believe in it when they're with the ones they love, because we have this innate, I think, God-created sense that love does go on beyond this realm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example. We have a friend in this country here, and I think she's come over to America, and named Zoe, and she's actually changed the law in this country. And she's campaigned for those that have lost babies, full term or, miscarriages. And babies in this country will now be given a birth certificate, a kind of a dual certificate, whereas previously all they got was a death certificate. And very, very interesting. And there's something that she's done which was absolutely about this subject, about the intrinsic value of one human life, and that life being like formally, officially documented and recorded in the registry of births and deaths. So she's literally changed the law. She's become, I mean, she's done an incredible job, and she's one of us. She's a Christian, and she's done it because she experienced that. And for her, those babies must not be forgotten, must not just be treated as refuse, in the corner of an operating room. So in a way, I love that, because that's an area where I see some improvement, some really strong improvement. And so, yeah, challenging moment we're in.
It is a challenging worldview to fully confront in our current society. And yet, I think that we have an incredible opportunity to share what it is that we believe and why, and to demonstrate the impact, the reason why it must be so, why it's needed in healthcare. This has been a great conversation just to, again, remember and to remind ourselves the value of human life stems from the assignment of God. And we are privileged to be able to serve that in healthcare. Thank you, Paul. This has been a great conversation. Thanks for sharing the depth of your worldview on the value of human life.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us today. I'm Dr. Jennifer Kang, and this has been the Restore Healthcare Project. Hey, Healthcare Tribe, I hope that you have been impacted by what I've brought through this podcast. I also want you to know about opportunities to give back through my nonprofit, Selah Health International. We work to support projects for women and children of vulnerable populations around the world. You can learn more and donate on our website, selahhealthinternational.org.